Correct your intentions. Let's keep going here in this famous Sunni manual called famously Barahin. Barahin. It means the depository of arguments, of fundamental arguments. Depository means place where you're going to find them, the place where they're all gathered. Here means the source. So that's where you're going to find them. That's where they are deposited in this booklet here. Barahin. Al-Barahin means the arguments. Barahin is plural of burhan, or proofs. Proofs or arguments. These are the arguments. Here in this text, which is a creedal text, the author gives the basic mental arguments for the meanings of the two shahadas. We're going to continue from where we stopped. And that's here where he says, وَمِمَّا يَسْتَحِيلُ فِي حَقِّهِ تَعَالَى عِشْرُونَ صِفَةً. And among what is impossible concerning him, exalted is he, are 20 attributes. There are 20 attributes that are impossible to attribute to God. وَهِيَ أَوْدَادُ الْعِشْرِينَ الْأُولَى. Those are the opposites of, or what's contrary to, the first 20. Well, means you then has missed so much class then. This is our second session in this book. وَهِيَ الْعَدَمُ وَالْحُدُوثُ وَطُرُوءُ الْعَدَمِ. Those 20 impossibilities, those 20 impossible attributes for God are non-existence, nothingness, and createdness, and vanishing, وَالْمُمَاثَلَةُ لِلْحَوَادِثِ, and comparability to created things. And how would he be comparable to created things? Yani, how would such a comparison be? The an yakuna jirna, by him being something of volume, by God being some substance of volume. Then, if God were some substance of volume filling a space, then he would be comparable to created things. أي تأخذ ذاته العلية قدرا من الفراغ, meaning for his high self to take an amount of space, to take up or to occupy an amount of space. So we said his high self, what does that mean? That means majestic. ذاته العلية, that means his majestic self, because highness has two meanings. A meaning of physical highness and a meaning of greatness. You have to be knowledgeable about language, brothers and sisters. You can't be just literalists. You can't, don't be willfully ignorant. Don't make yourself dumb concerning language, modes of speech. Don't hear a statement that can have two meanings and then you turn into a nervous wreck because you have a problem about blasphemy instead of taking it easy أي تأخذ ذاته العلية قدرا من الفراغ, meaning for his high self to take up an amount of space. High here means majestic, majestically high self. So if you heard someone say, for example, I believe in the Most High, you don't have to be like, you don't have to be necessarily scared here. If you heard somebody say, I want to be closer to God, you don't have to have a nervous breakdown here. A lot of times, brothers and sisters, the issue is not the other people. A lot of times the issue is some of our own people, which is that you learned about blasphemy, that's true, and then you became so strict in the way you speak, but you don't realize that people don't speak as strictly as you do, not even normally. It was your knowledge and your fear of blasphemy that made you so strict about how you speak, but other people don't. But then what's the problem here? It's not a problem that you're strict in the way you speak. The problem is that makes you become like you don't understand how the language works. And then when someone just speaks normally, you have a nervous breakdown because they're not being like you. You say, what if you know they don't have knowledge and you are afraid for them? Still, though, because you need to understand, though, you, you need to understand people and you need to understand language. Yani, this question here, what if you know they don't have knowledge, but yeah, maybe they don't have knowledge, but there's something that I'm telling you that you need to, I suggest for you to take heed to, which is that you need to understand people and you need to understand language. It's like, for example, the Arabs, they would have said so many different things, right? They would have said yed or ayn, or they would have said, I'm not talking about Quran, I'm talking about their language. Or they would have said urlu, high, alin, high. They would have said qarib, they would have said all of that and it would have been understood between them. For some people, it's like that only works in Arabic, doesn't work anywhere else. If you're not speaking Arabic and you say something that's like that, then now we're afraid for you. Maybe you're a kafir. That's because of your lack of understanding language and your lack of understanding people. That's why you confuse the other people when you start bringing up topics that was so far from their minds. Say, maybe this is blasphemy. You know, when we say this, we don't mean that. And then the person's like, yeah, sure, yeah, okay. He wasn't even going there. You were going there. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. You say, can you ask them what do they mean by that? And sometimes. But if you understand language, a lot of times you don't have to. Yani, I remember, for example, in college, where so many debates take place about so many things, including theology. I remember debating with different types of people and talking to different types of people. Some people's their habit to say most high, not Wahhabis, non-Muslims altogether. It's their habit to say most high. Most high doesn't mean they're saying God is in a place, though. Yani, even if they believe that God is in a place, when they said most high, it doesn't mean they're talking about a place. Wahhabis, they have an agenda in particular, though. The Wahhabis have a particular agenda to make people believe that Allah is like the creations. So on purpose, they say words like that. But other people, they're not doing like that. What's going to happen, though, is that you're going to be so weak in language. You're not going to understand what people mean when they say things. And you're going to confuse people and bring to them things that they never even crossed their minds. They weren't talking about. You're going to maybe even deem a person as a kafir, or you're going to be confused. So anyway, let's continue here. وَالْمُمَاثَلَةُ لِلْحَوَادِثِ. So among what's impossible to be an attribute of God is comparability to created things. And how would that be? بِأَنْ يَكُونَ جِرْمًا أي تأخذ ذاته العلية قدرا من الفراغ. meaning for his dhatuhul aliyah, for his high self to take up an amount of space. How come when he says that here, you're not afraid for him? He committed blasphemy, or maybe you are. You might say, well, I'm not afraid for him that he committed blasphemy because he has knowledge. Just be mindful. Oh, yakuna aradan yakumu bil jirm, or he would be comparable to creations had he been some fleeting quality that exists through a substance that fills a space. Some fleeting quality like movement and stillness. Movement is fleeting because it comes and goes. Fleeting means temporary. Arad is the temporal attribute of the creation, something that comes and goes. We have many attributes like that. You move and then you stop moving. You'll be still and then you'll stop being still. And you'll talk and then you'll be silent. And you'll be silent and then you'll talk. And like that. And you would know something and then you wouldn't know it anymore. And you wouldn't know something and then you would come to know something. And you would be healthy and then you'd be sick and then you'd be healthy again. And like that. That's called arad, the fleeting qualities of created things. It's impossible that God would be like the creation, because then he would either be some substance that fills a space, or he would be a fleeting quality that exists through such a substance. And let me be clear here also. I'm not encouraging you to talk in that way. I'm not telling you you should go and talk like that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying to you, repeat to you what I'm saying to you. Understand language. Don't think just because you speak English means you really understand it. If people really understood English, although they speak it, they wouldn't have so many blasphemy questions. Understand people. People don't always just talk literally and that's it. They talk, yani. Imagine how people would be had they not learned the details of like what we learned in Creed. How would they talk? They would talk like maybe some of us used to talk before we became Muslims. And I mean, take out the ignorance and haram. I just mean use of language. You need to understand how people are and how language is. That's all I'm telling you. I'm not saying go and talk like that. When you talk to your ignorant friend or ignorant associate, and then he says to you, well, you are closer to God than I am. You don't have to now say, oh no, what am I going to do? Well, how am I going to tell this person? I need to find a way to bring to his attention that and he doesn't even, and it never occurs to you that he just simply means not all of what you're going through in your own mind. Never occurs to you. That's a problem there. أو يكون عرضا يقوم بالجرم أو يكون في جهة للجرم, or for him to be in a direction of some substance that fills a space. The direction. Or for him to be in a direction of something that has volume, a substance of volume. Volume means takes up space, fills space. It's impossible that he would be like the creations, such as being in a direction of of some substance that fills a space. Oh, lahu huwa jiha, or for him to have his own direction. What's a direction? Some scholars said the direction is the place itself. Some said a direction is a place in comparison to another. It's a place in comparison to another. Some said a direction is a particular area, a nahiya, a particular area. Some said a direction is the trajectory of a moving object. Some said a direction is the trajectory of a moving object. Some said direction is the area of pointing, the area of pointing. So all of that, no matter which way you want to define that, all of that is impossible for God. أو يتقيد بمكان, or for him to be restricted to a place, limited to a place, yani isolated in a place, or for him to be isolated in a place. That means for him to be filling a space. What is a place? A place is the space occupied by a volume, occupied by a substance with volume. Place is the void, the emptiness that's occupied by a volume, a substance with volume. So the sun, for example, it is an a substance of an object of volume, fills up space. That volume, it fills some amount of space. It's necessary. It's mentally necessary. This thing that has particles, you add one particle, two particles, five particles, 10 particles, a million particles. Who knows how big it is? Might be as big as a golf ball, might be as big as the sun, might be in between that. Has particles, might be dense, tangible particles, or might be very subtle, intangible particles like light or darkness or wind. Nevertheless, though, made of particles filling a space, it must fill a space by virtue of having particles. So it has volume. That means it's, by definition, fills a space. So some people would ask, the first creations were water and the Arsh. What about place? When was place created? So the answer is place came along with the water because the water is made of particles. That means it's going to have to fill a space. The more particles it has, the more space it's going to necessarily fill, intrinsically fill. There's no avoiding that. You can't separate those two. You can't say this thing has particles, but it's not filling any space. With water came the creation of time and place, correct? I heard two things concerning time. With water came the creation of place, that's definitely correct. But did time exist with the water, or time existed with the Arsh, which was the second creation? I heard it said time was created with the Arsh because it's the second creation. Because time needs, by definition, two events. Two events. Time is the measurement between two events. I mean, wafikum. But I heard also that time came with the water. Time is the measurement of two events. So let's say, for example, this water was created. Were there waves moving in that water? How was that water? So if there was any event happening, if there were events happening by the creation of that water, then there was time. That's clear? Yes, the water coming into existence is an event. That's true. And what? And then what? You said, so that's when time started. What did I say time is? You said time is the measurement of two events. So now look at your statement. You said water coming into existence is an event. How many events is that? Okay, so is the issue clear for you now? Well, I said it, and then you asked me to repeat myself, and then I repeated myself, and then you said contrary to what you made me repeat. Okay. Barakallahu feek. Imam As-Sanusiyyah, he says, impossible concerning God, the exalted, Ta'ala, the high, yani the one who is exalted. Impossible for him are 20 attributes, which are the opposites of the first 20 that we already mentioned. They are al-adam, nothingness, non-existence. Wal-huduth, createdness, having a beginning. Wal-turu al-adam, and vanishing, coming to an end. Wal-mumathalatu lil-hawadith, and comparison or comparability to created things. Bi-an yakuna jirma, which would be by being a substance of volume. A, تأخذ ذاته العلية قدرا من الفراغ, meaning by being a substance of volume that his high self would take up an amount of space. أو يكون عرضا يقوم بالجرم, or that he would be a fleeting quality that exists through some substance of volume, does not have independent existence. أو يكون في جهة للجرم, or he would be comparable if he were in a direction of some substance of volume. Oh, له هو جهة, or for him to have a direction himself. أو يتقيد بمكان, or for him to be isolated in a place. Those all have similar meaning. If he's isolated in a place means he's in a direction. But if he's isolated in a place means also he just has a space, filling a space. So a direction is a place. The place is more broad than direction. Oh, zaman, or for him to be bound by time. يتقيد بزمان, or to be bound by time. To be isolated in place or bound by time. Yani, or if you want to use one word here, he says, أو يتقيد بمكان أو زمان. If we wanted to translate the word يتقيد as bound, then it would simply translate as or to be bound by place or time. أو تصف ذاته العلية بالحوادث, or for his high self to be attributed with creations. Like if someone believes he speaks and then stops speaking, and that he moves and he stops moving, or that he wills and then he stops willing, and then he wills again, and then he wills a different time, and then he wills a different will, and then he wills a different will. So that would be believing that he's attributed with creations, or that he is himself a vessel for created things. We are vessels for created things. Don't we have heartbeat within ourselves and blood flowing throughout our veins and the likes of such things, created things happening within us, food digesting in our stomachs and waste being processed, ready to be expelled, and breathing. These are all creations. We are vessels for events. So God would be comparable to creations if he were a vessel for events. أو يتصف بالصغر أو الكبر, or to be attributed with smallness or bigness. Here, this is another example. Look here. Don't you know, for example, the word great? The word great has two meanings. You say Allah is great, nobody has a problem. The word great has two meanings. It has a physical meaning because great can mean big. You know that, right? Great can mean large. That's one of its meanings. So if someone says God is great, do you say, oh, wait, slow down here? What do you mean by that? You don't. Here our author said, oh, yatasifa bisighar aw al-kibar, or to be attributed with smallness or bigness. Don't we say Allahu Akbar? Allah is the Akbar. So Akbar, someone might translate it as biggest. Allah is biggest. You'll find that strange. So someone else would translate it as greatest. Allah is greatest. Yeah, that's probably better. But the word great itself still has two meanings. Like the word high has two meanings. The word close has two meanings. So you need to understand language. أو يتصف بالأغراض في الأفعال أو الأحكام, or for him to be attributed with motivation, or to be attributed with having a goal, having goals. If God is attributed with motivation and having goals, then he would be like his creations. He would be comparable to his creations. To be attributed with motivations in what he does or in his rules, his ruling. Anything he does is not by a motivation or a goal. That's for created things. Maybe the word motivation is fine enough. Anything he does is not by motivation. That's for created things. So he's not attributed with motivations in his doings or in his rules when he makes something lawful or unlawful or obligatory. وكذا يستحيل عليه تعالى ألا يكون قائما بنفسه. And likewise, it is impossible for him, yani, concerning him. Exalted is he. High is he, yani, exalted. That he would not be independent. That he would not be independent. If he's not independent, then that would mean what? That would mean that he's dependent. Dependent means needy, which means having a requirement. Having a requirement. Like what? بأن يكون صفة يقوم بمحل. Like by being an attribute that exists through some vessel, being an attribute that exists through a vessel. What does that mean? So it means, as you know, there's two types of creations. Creations that fill a space, even if that's as minute as a single indivisible particle, still fills a space, though it's so minute, so miniature. Either fills a space or, yani, either it fills a space by itself. Like, so I have a cup here. This cup is independent from this computer. Each one fills its own space. This computer is independent, not from God, just independent from other created things, independent from other things that fill their own space. So the computer is a vessel. The cup is a vessel. Yeah, when I say vessel here, I don't mean a container like a cup. I mean something that through which other things exist, attributes. So my cup here has blackness. So the black that's an attribute of my cup, it doesn't exist independently. It won't separate from the cup. Also, this cup has some metal. So having metal then means has some smoothness and coolness. The metal is cool when there's nothing heating it. At room temperature, the metal becomes cool. So that coolness, it exists through the metal, doesn't exist independently. It can't separate from the metal and still be existing. No, a single particle is not a body. A body is at least two particles. So it's impossible that he would not be independent, like by being an attribute, because an attribute by definition does not exist independently. An attribute exists through something else. The place of an attribute does exist in a place, but its place is the place of its vessel. So the color of your skin, whatever it is, that color It doesn't exist independently. It can't move from you and go exist somewhere else. So it has a place. Its place is the place of your body. Your color is not your body. It's an attribute of your body. Your body has its own place. It's independent from another thing that has its own place. Like your body has its own space that it fills, and your chair that you sit in has its own place that it fills, and your body is independent from your chair. Your color, it doesn't have its own space that it fills, but it does exist in a space. It does exist in a place, just not by itself. Through you, through your body, it exists in a place. Your color's place is your body's place. Oh, يحتاج أو يحتاج إلى مخصص. Or he would not be independent if he needs a specifier, if he needs a particularizer, if he needs a specifier. What does that mean? Yani, anything that has one way instead of another way, anything that exists one way instead of another way, then that's a specification. It was specified with that way over another way. So anything that exists in one way over another way needs a specifier. It's not independent. So what do we say about God? We say God exists without any way. He exists without any way. You said, isn't that the same for darkness and light? It doesn't exist independently. No, that's not the case. Light does have an independent existence, and darkness does have an independent existence, because both of them are bodies made of particles. Light is made of particles itself, and darkness is made of particles itself. So they have their own space. And then they have their attributes. So it might be brighter or darker. One light could be lighter than another. One darkness could be darker than another. And they move. The light travels at phenomenal speed. He says, وَكَذَا يَسْتَحِيلُ عَلَيْهِ تَعَالَى أَلَّا يَكُونَ وَاحِدًا. And also, it is impossible for him, exalted is he, that he not be one. بأن يكون مركبا في ذاته, which would be by being composed in himself or constructed in himself. Murakkaban, that means having pieces come together. That's tarkib. Tarkib is the union of two or more units. Construction or composition. So when we say Allah is one, we mean absolutely one. His oneness is different from the oneness of a creation, because the oneness of a creation would be, for example, uh, a composition of pieces. Like me, I'm one person, but I have pieces. Oh, so many particles. Allah knows how many particles I'm made of. So that's not the same oneness, just the same word, not the same meaning though. Or oneness for creation means one of others, one out of others, one amongst others. One for creation means comparable. One for Allah means incomparable. And one for Allah means not even made of pieces at all. It doesn't mean what it means for the creation. أو يكون له مماثل في ذاته, or that he would have a likeness in his self. Had he not been one, then he would be, he would have a likeness. He would have a kind. Even for creation, there's an expression, one of a kind. When something is one of a kind, doesn't that mean there's not another one of the same kind? That's what it means. But even that sentence in itself, it still means that the thing is comparable. Even had we supposed that something is truly one of a kind, it still means it's comparable. The statement itself means it's comparable because we are supposing that it has a kind. We're supposing that it could have another one, but it doesn't. So we said one of a kind, like the sun and the moon. There's only one sun. Don't listen to those kuffar. Some of you guys listen to the kuffar. You're not, you think I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes, maybe. There's only one moon. Don't listen to those kuffar. So it's one of a kind. Still comparable, though. When we say Allah is one, means he's not comparable. So had he not been one, then he would have a similar. Fi dhatihi, in his self. Oh, sifatihi, or his attributes. أو يكون معه في الوجود مؤثر في فعل من الأفعال, or there would be with him, if he weren't one, there would be with him in existence an effector in some action. Effector here means creator. So when we say he's one in his doings, it means no one affects anything in reality but Allah. So that means, according to that, when you're driving and you put your foot on the gas and you push that gas pedal down with your foot, you are not the one who affects the movement in the gas pedal. And when you turn the steering wheel with your hand, you are not the one who affects the movement of that steering wheel. That means you don't create anything. If Allah will, you won't be able to push that gas pedal down, even if there was nothing wrong with it. If Allah willed, you wouldn't be able to pull a piece of paper out of your book. You wouldn't be able to rip a sheet of paper out of your book. When you pull a piece of paper and rip it out of your book, you are not the one who affects that. Allah is the effector. In reality, this is the way the Ash'aris talk. The Ash'aris say, no one is an effector in reality but Allah, because to them, effect means creating. وكذا يستحيل عليه تعالى العجز عن ممكن ما. And likewise, impossible for him, exalted as he is, being disabled from anything possible, from any possibility whatsoever. It's impossible that he would be disabled from any possibility whatsoever. So, like we said in some previous classes, doesn't Allah create into the unending future? He does. He creates into the unending future. So that means that he can create anything possible. Don't you see all the people have different faces? You go outside, you go on the sidewalk, on the bus, the train, the highway, wherever you go, to the store, so many people, different faces. How many faces are there out there? Allah Ta'ala has the power to create every single person with a different face. Every single one of them. And never, Allah has the power to never give two people the same face. That's what we mean. And I'm trying to give you examples to make you understand what it means. That he is not disabled from any possibility whatsoever, from creating anything possible whatsoever. And all these different things he created, all these shapes. Did you ever see starfish walking on sand, on the beach? Starfish? Something so baffling. You can't believe you're seeing with your own eyes. All those shapes of different things. You saw the chameleon? You see how his hands are? So weird, doesn't it? It has eyes go all around. His eyes independent from each other? His one eye looks one way, his other eye looks the other way. Can you do that? I can't do that. I think if you can do that, means your eyes are broken, you human being. So Allah Ta'ala has the power to create whatever He wills. Anything possible. Let's stop here, and inshallah we'll continue here next time. Question: Can you please elaborate? What do you mean by this? Don't listen to the kuffar that there is only one. There is only one moon. That's correct. Don't listen to the kuffar because they said there's a lot of moons. There's only one moon. And they said there's a lot of suns. There's only one sun. The stars are not suns. I mean, Rafiq. Star is one thing and sun is something else. There's only one of them. There's many stars. There's one sun. You said if a Muslim says the stars are pieces of the sun, is that kufr? I haven't heard about this, but if I did hear someone say that, I wouldn't call him a kafir for that. Because this is not something that, in the first place, goes back to believing in Allah fundamentally. If he says that, doesn't mean he disbelieves in Allah fundamentally, or disbelieves in the Prophet fundamentally, or disbelieves in the Quran fundamentally, or disbelieves in Islam fundamentally. If I heard someone say that, I wouldn't call him a kafir. You said if you go to an Islamic bookstore and they sell books that have blasphemy, do you need to warn the seller? And I don't know if you need to. You might not need to. That's not a question that has, Yani, that's not a situation that has one scenario so that it only has one answer. Because that's what you're seeking here in your question. Is there one answer for every single scenario? There's not, because there's different scenarios. So you said, when you said understand people and language, do you mean for a non-Muslim friend that say, I'm going to leave it in Allah's hand, but they are meaning Allah's care, right? For example, yeah. I'll tell you what happens. What happens is, before one of us learned, right? Let's say one of us who wasn't born into the knowledge, like some of our children, they were born and raised up in amongst people of knowledge, but some of us were not. So before that, what was our case? Yeah, we were ignorant, yes. We didn't know how to avoid blasphemy. That's true. That's true. But what was our case besides that, too? Our case was that we would talk like everyone else talked, right? Like you would say hand with the meaning of power or care, and it's normal for you. You're just using the word with one of its meanings. And if somebody were to say it to you, it would not be confusing for you. You wouldn't be confused. If you were with your family and then one of them said, can you go talk to mom? You're closer to her than me. You won't say, huh? What do you mean closer? I'm here with you. She's far from both of us. She has the same distance from both of us. You wouldn't even go through that, all of that. You know what the person is saying. How come after a person starts learning, he doesn't understand anymore? What happened there? Before, when you were ignorant and someone said a statement like that, it would be fine. Now that you learned, you got confused. What happened there? Ameen. Barakallahu feekum. Yes. You said you guess a weakness of mind. It could be sometimes. But It shouldn't be anyone's case that before he acquired the knowledge, he could understand something. And then after he acquires the knowledge, he stops understanding. By acquiring the knowledge, you should gain more understanding. Your comprehension's supposed to improve by getting the knowledge, not to disintegrate. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.